I'm very happy and excited and honored that you found the time to be with us on Leverage today. I am ecstatic to welcome Kelly Aizicowitz. Again, I probably said it wrong, and I just
That was
practiced it
perfect.
for an hour. But yeah, as I said, my maiden name is Trajkovic, so my whole childhood was like, oh God, they're getting to the T's. It's almost my turn. So why ABC Toronto? Why is ABC Toronto on Leverage? We have a city election coming in October. I have never been involved in politics. I've never had any interest in it. To get involved, I've always been interested in politics. I'm ironically more US politics. I've probably just found it's more like a reality show. We're all very vanilla here in Canada. And somehow, over the last decade, it has become anything but vanilla. And the last time I had ABC Toronto on the podcast, we were far from any election. Brad Bradford was a name that very few people knew, and I had the pleasure of being introduced to him and got to know him. And so I personally, for what it's worth, have endorsed him and how much weight that gives. But today I want to talk about what ABC Toronto does. So if anyone missed the first episode, let's talk about who ABC Toronto is, A Better City Toronto. When you guys founded, how you came about, and then let's talk about what's going on in Toronto and all the things that are important to Torontonians, whether you're a renter, whether you're a homeowner, it doesn't matter. This affects everybody. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kelly Aizicowitz, the Executive Director of A Better City Toronto, or ABC Toronto, where I'm thrilled to be here with you today, Rachel. And yeah, there's a lot going on. So to go back to the very beginning, A Better City Toronto was founded last year. And we are a group of concerned citizens who don't think that the city is on the right track. And we have a municipal election coming up on October 26th. We want to see change in the mayor's office, and we want to see change at city council. Because we think with new leadership and generational change, we will be able to get Toronto back on track and have it live up to its reputation and promise as the economic engine of the country.
Yeah, and as I mentioned when we were just talking before the show started, I have never thought of doing it, but I think I will reach out to Progress Toronto, which is, for lack of a better way of saying it, really your counterpart. And again, if anyone is not aware of this, the city, unlike the US, in I think across Canada, like the city election or whoever is running, it's bipartisan. So you're not running as a conservative or a Democrat or an NDP or independent. Everybody is just nonpartisan. And so what I find really interesting is that this group called Progress Toronto, how long have they been around?
They've been around since 2014. And
Wow, so 12 years, and they are not. They are very, very entrenched in one political party. So, it's great that something was created as another side to balance things out, even though neither of you are a political party necessarily, but you're there to speak on certain issues. My question is, like, what do you think instigated there to be a need even for a Progress Toronto, for example, to why wasn't it enough? Like, you're not a political party, right? So why wasn't it enough for the city of Toronto's mayor just to be, its own voice? Why did there need to be a group created?
so, my understanding of the history of the founding of their organization is really it came about after losing elections where Rob Ford was elected mayor, John Tory was elected mayor, and
So it could be seen
those
more
on the
conservative.
left, yeah, and I would even say they're left of the NDP. They're more on the extreme side, in my opinion. And so they all got together and said, we have to do something. And, to be frank, I take my hat off to them. They developed this organization. They have a playbook that they put into place, and they have been able to get council seats elected, and then in the by-election in 2023, we're able to get Olivia Chow elected as mayor. Now, we founded at the beginning of last year because we saw that there was a real need for a centrist counterweight to a lot of their policy positions. And
I
so,
would say that's a really good way of putting it because they can be perceived as being very extreme left. If anyone has noticed that Olivia Chow wears purple everywhere, that is their color. So just so you're aware, there is no disjointed. Like if people are saying, oh, that has nothing to do with her, it very much does. But I find ABC Toronto to be very centrist. Like I don't see you as a right-wing organization in any way, shape, or form. It's just basic things that you're looking to do to make the city better.
we are, and I'll be completely upfront and honest. I was a staffer for the McGuinty government back
Oh, I
in
didn't know that.
2008 to
Okay.
2009. So I come, from the Liberal Party, and we have folks from the Conservative Party who are involved in our board as well. And so what you've said is entirely correct. Like, we are just looking for common sense, centrist positions and policies from city council and from the mayor's office that don't sort of, divide Torontonians along ideological lines, and just, make decisions that make sense. It should not be hard to say, if a pothole is reported, that the city will fix it within 24 hours. But our current mayor seems to have an issue doing, even the most basic things. And so that's why we want to see change, and somebody who will take on these very basic problems that, are in the city's purview, have been in the city's purview for.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. Like, I think it's just basic day to day. Like I said, this is about renters, it's about homeowners, it's about every level of income and wealth. And so I really, the city of Toronto and the mayor needs to be someone who represents the majority of the city. And I would say that, if you looked at the heat map of where the voters came out to vote for Olivia Chow, last one, it was like solid red south of Bloor, and then like nothing north of Bloor. And so, is she a downtown mayor? I think so. I don't know really what that would mean. I just coined that phrase. There you go. I am calling her the downtown mayor.
I would say yes, like the downtown core very specifically, is supportive, but around the core there, there are places like Etobicoke Lakeshore where Amber Morley, who is a Progress Toronto candidate, won the election. And there are a couple of wards in Scarborough as well where, because of the organizational heft that Progress Toronto has, they can get boots on the ground pretty quickly to go in and canvass. And so that's where we also think it's like incredibly important for people to be activated over the summer, to look for campaigns where a centrist candidate has a chance of winning, and go out and knock on doors for a couple hours every weekend. Do some phone banking for that candidate, because they're going to need all the help that they can get. And I cannot stress enough that this election, all elections are won at the door. It is who is
Oh, I
making
agree.
that connection with the voter there.
I completely agree. And I think that, I mean, again, anyone who's listening to this who cares, please, you can reach out to me. I will have Kelly's info also in the show notes. And if you just don't know how to get involved, you're willing to pick up a phone and call and do that type of volunteering, or, to start, I'm going to be canvassing for sure. There's no question about it. And I have a dear friend who also, like, she said, that's it. Tell me how to get involved. I'm going to come and knock on doors. And I will knock on doors where I don't want to knock on doors. Go knock on doors where it, like, don't do it in your neighborhood where you've already got the votes. Go somewhere else, get out of your, like, comfort zone and knock on doors where someone is going to tell you, I'm not voting for this person, and talk to them. Find out why. Like, I think that, and again, I think that's something that I think ABC Toronto does really well, is talks to the average person. I know you have a new campaign out on social media, and you were telling me about this before, and I think it's great. It's just these average people. This guy, he was a tradesman. I don't remember what he did, an electrician. He's lived in Toronto his whole life, and his car stolen, or his house was
Yeah.
broken into, or something.
It was worse than that. So Stephanos, if folks go to our Instagram profile, it's ABC_Toronto. You can see the video of Stephanos, which went viral. So he is a construction worker. In 2025, I believe, he had 2 trucks stolen from his front yard, from his driveway. He had a club on. He had everything that you're supposed to do to keep your car safe. And then to add to that, he had $20,000 worth of tools stolen from one of the sites that he was working on. And, if you watch that video, he basically says, like, I feel alone here. There isn't anybody in a position of power who is coming to the fore to say this isn't okay and we need to resolve this. And there are so many Torontonians who have experienced, whether it's car theft or home invasions, which since Mayor Chow took office have increased by 86%. I've spoken to so many people in all neighborhoods across the city who now are hiring private security to patrol their blocks overnight because they're terrified that somebody is going to come into their home while they're sleeping. And I can't blame them for doing that. But when I look at Toronto Police Services, there are 500 officer vacancies. Those need to be filled. We need to get more officers on the ground working on cases where there have been car theft, where there have been home invasions, and not only working on cases that have happened, but also helping to prevent these from happening.
Prevention, for sure. No, I know a gentleman who owns a company which he puts film on windows so that it's harder to break into. I did it on my house. It's supposed to take longer to break so that by the time, like, they're still trying to get in, the police have come, which necessarily, listen, I have seen an increase in, I live in a very predominant Jewish neighborhood. I have seen a huge increase in police in my neighborhood, and I've actually seen a huge increase of, I think it was last weekend, I was driving, doing showings. I don't remember what part of the city I was, but it was right through Toronto. And I actually texted my husband and I said, is something going on? I said, because I've never seen this many cops. And I went, oh, I know what's going on. It's an election year now all of a sudden. But we do need, listen, whoever is our next mayor, and I didn't know this about Mayor Chow, is that she does not sit on the police board.
That is, to me, just if I can pause on that for a second, that to me is the biggest abdication of responsibility on her part. She has a seat as mayor. And for her to say, nope, I'm going to delegate this to somebody else is basically her saying, I'm going to delegate the safety of Torontonians to someone else. And that is, just
Doesn't delegate risk.
total non-starter, especially given, as you say, the time that she spends on other things. And when I see that, Brad Bradford has said he will sit on that if elected mayor. Yeah, that is like the baseline.
Right.
That's setting the
100%.
table.
And so again, going back to like just basic things that I think, I'm sure there are people like the supporters of Chow would say like crime is not her fault. Like there's all sorts of things that have happened. I mean, we've seen a downfall in society, unfortunately, not to get like too existential since COVID, and it hasn't gotten better across the board. But I would say that, Daniel of integrity.to said it perfectly. He's like, she's still the CEO of this city, and the responsibility, like,
It lies with her.
it's on the shoulders of the mayor. And that would go for Brad Bradford also. Like when he comes in, God willing, I have expectations as someone who supports him to say, I want to see a change. I mean, there were days, and we'll get into other like topics that are important to people, but safety is like number one, right? Like just number one. Like we always had a safe city. Toronto was always a safe city. I took the subway home as a kid. I mean, I'm old now, but like I took a subway home at night at 11 o'clock, walked the street by myself, never, like that was the city we live in.
And now you won't let your kids do that.
I tell my daughter, we'll talk about the TTC next, but like, my daughter will say, she's 23 and she'll be like, well, I'm going to go down and meet a friend. I'm just going to take the TTC. And I think, I really need you to be careful. I need you to be aware of who's around you, and do not stand near the platform. Under any circumstances, do not stand near the platform until that train has come to a full stop. Under no circumstances. And like I feel very passionate because I don't take the subway, but as a rule, just because of my job. But I was on it recently, and we'll get into that in a minute. But so, there was a time where you would be someone who lived in Toronto, and there were parts of the city that just had, people who lived in tents that were homeless. Very sad. Every city has them. There's unfortunately a lot of people who are on the street have mental health issues. They've been through horrendous traumas in their life. Like there's only so many beds. Anyway. Now, in every neighborhood, whether I saw someone going up Bathurst the other day talking to himself, screaming at the top of his lungs, and it's one. Soon there will be 10. I live on a park. I would not be surprised if there were encampments soon. They were in rows everywhere now, and I mean,
this is something that we've talked about a lot as well at A Better City Toronto, because the current approach of the city, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on their homelessness and addiction programming policies. And we don't have a lot to show for it. They're not working. And I would argue that they are not compassionate. They leave the most vulnerable people who, as you have said, like have faced real trauma, are having mental health issues, addiction issues.
By accident.
They're just leaving them be. And that is not a solution. So we have talked about real recovery for people who are in the throes of addiction, getting them into detox, getting them into rehab, actually focusing on getting them back into society. I don't think, when you speak to people who have recovered, most would say, like, I wasn't in my right mind to make a decision about what I should do or what the right decision would do. Like at a certain point, you need somebody to make that decision for you. And our chair, Jeffrey Crocker, was in Yorkville maybe about a month ago, and there was a man who was clearly high on illicit drugs, punching a wall, screaming. There was a dad with one little girl in a stroller, another holding his hand, and he was like maneuvering his way through. And it's just like when somebody is becoming a danger to themselves and other people, we have to take action. This isn't a lifestyle choice, and we have to realize that and start to take the action that they need to get back into their lives.
I mean, I had a part-time job at the Eaton Center when I was a kid, and like there were this is going to someone's going to rake me over the coals for this, but like there were regular homeless people. Like when we were kids, like, and they would ask you for money and they weren't aggressive, and, there were vans that would go around and pick them up, or they'd invite, like they would go to a homeless shelter at night, and that's not a solution either. I'm just saying now, and I tell the story about how I ran the Sporting Life 10K with my running partner. And it'll be a good segue to get into the subway story, TTC issue, but it spit us out at like Cherry Street. And so we decided we're going to walk back along Queen Street to get onto the subway at the Eaton Center.
What a great stretch of Queen Street.
So again, full of transparency in my life. Like I get in my car, I go to a client's house, then I go to the next one and the next one. So I just don't, unfortunately, walk a lot, and I'm not downtown like that a lot. And I will tell you that, there were several blocks where we had to maneuver onto the street around what people look like were just walking zombies. It was very, very sad. They were not aggressive. They were just out of their mind. And there wasn't one, there was like 15. And I witnessed 2 completely open drug deals, like just completely out in the open. One of them being in the driveway of St. Mike's Hospital, of all places. And I saw several police cars driving by doing absolutely nothing about it. So we get to the subway. We'll go on to the TTC now as the next issue, because and that follows you now. So now the homeless people are on the subway. It's very sad. And we were waiting for the subway, and there was like a supervisor, really nice man. I don't remember what his name was. We were chatting with him. And, my friend takes the subway to work every single day. And she had said to me at one point, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. Who's responsible for this? Someone should be accountable for it. And she's telling him, and he says, I'm not allowed to move them. I'm not allowed to approach them. He's like, I am not allowed. And I know that she started this whole, we have officers, or you can push the button, or this app that she's talking about in real time. And I saw a guy, we got onto the subway, and there was a homeless man, whatever he was, harassing these women across the aisle from us and yelling at them in their faces. And it was terrifying. And I said to them after, are you okay? And they're like, yeah. And I said, elections in October. Everyone needs to get out and vote.
Everybody needs to get out and vote. And I have my own subway story, if I may, for a minute. So we take our daughter, she's going into SK, on the subway to school every day. And there have just been too many instances. There was one time where somebody, I think it was a woman, was high and screaming, and Mama, why is that lady screaming so loud? And kind of a bit nervous. Another time, and I spoke about this, I was on TVO, where we got off the subway at Spadina Station, and I look to my left, and there is a man out of his mind just beating a payphone with its receiver. And so, I had to run out with as fast as a 4-year-old can run, and get out there. But, the mayor's solution to all of this is call 311 or use the app. That's not a solution. We need actual people who are there to help. So we were very happy when we saw that the provincial government added more special constables to the line. We want to see more police because they do act as a deterrent, and people, I think, more than not need that help. But yeah, her solution of an app is just sort of kind of laughable, because in all reality, I didn't have time to do that in either instance, because I have a 4-year-old with me. She is my priority. Keeping her safe is what I need to do. And then I got to get on with my day. So I have time to report it. And
What would have been done anyway? And like,
yeah, there's not much that would have happened because there weren't that many staff around. And Spadina Station is a pretty big station because it's got the Young University line and it has the Bloor Danforth line. Like, you're kind of running all over the place to get to where you need to be in that station. And so this is where it's just more resources, more actual officers who you could go speak to would have been really helpful.
yeah, I mean, the TTC is meant to be used by everyone. And, I was telling you the story about a friend who is an ER doctor and he works at Mackenzie Health, so in Vaughan. But this TTC goes up there now. So what happens is they pass out on the subway. They get taken off the subway at the end, right? Because they're not allowed to sleep there. And they're brought to the emergency room, of which they're treated for whatever is going on. And then, he's said to me, like, they call the social worker, and the social worker goes, he told me the story that happened in the winter. And he said, we need to find a bed for this person. Like, they're homeless, they're like they're strung out, whatever, blah, 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 blah. They're not well, right? And she says, there's no shelters in Vaughan, which I didn't know, which is really quite interesting. And so he said, well, we can't send him out on the street. It's like below zero. So they keep him overnight in the hospital and they give him bus fare and they put him back on the subway back to Toronto. And he said it's broken. Like, it's so broken. And so I think, like, as we look at this and we say, listen, we're obviously neither of us are supporters of Chow, but I think that regardless if it's Chow or not, there's things that are literally broken in the city. And whether they're her fault or not, let's just go with this. Whether they're her fault or not, she still needs to be responsible to fix them. And when you can't even do the basics, I mean, this is, like you said, 311, I started laughing. I'll tell you why. So my children, I'm like, we're almost empty nesters. Our kids, like, basically don't live at home anymore. And so I'm like, why am I paying for a huge garbage can? Okay, I'm a big recycler, but I want a smaller garbage can because it's barely like half full even. Okay, I call 311. If I tell you the story of how I still have a large garbage can because they tell me to put it out, then they never come. The one time I watched the guy go to my door, slap a sticker on my door. I didn't even realize who it was at first. Slap a sticker on my door to say he came and it wasn't there. My garbage can was right there. And I went out, opened the door, screamed after him. He heard me. There's no way he did not hear me. And he ignored me calling after him, got back in his truck and left. And I'm like, I'm just not calling anymore. Like, I'm not calling anymore. I can't even change my garbage can.
Yeah, that is really a perfect example of just the lack of accountability at City Hall. And that comes from the very top. There is, I would say, from the mayor's office, from many of the Progress Toronto councillors' offices, where if you would bring them that story, they would say, oh, I'll get it next time, right? Like, let it go. This is fine. And when, we talked about we have an ad campaign running right now on social media, which basically says, no, this is not fine. Like, Toronto used to be a world-class city with great public services. You felt like you were, beautiful parks. You were paying property taxes, and you really felt like you were getting something back. And now we're sort of told just to accept mediocrity. And at A Better City Toronto, and this ad campaign that is on right now, is that you don't have to accept this. Actually, you can say, I want better. and I deserve better services and want to see this city thriving and growing again and sort of being, that beacon of the best city across the country.
I agree. And I would like, I'll tie like real estate in a little bit. And again, all of the haters will come after me because they're just going to think that this is, hitting my pocketbook. And that's that's the only reason I care. But I have watched people leaving real estate as an investment to their portfolios because they just don't want to be landlords, because the risk of getting a bad tenant, and I have these conversations. Like I'm the first person actually to talk someone out of buying something. They'll say, well, we'll just hold on to it, we'll rent it, and then when we're ready, we'll just sell it. And I'm like, so I need you to understand. And by the way, I think there were laws that were brought in that needed to be brought in because there were landlords who were like, yeah, your lease is over, you got to go because I want to jack the rent up, and just kicked people out. There were definitely a need for it. But the challenge now is not only has it swayed so much over to the tenant side, it needs to be a balanced relationship. If you don't have in any relationship you have, it's not balanced, it doesn't work, right? So, and then on top of it, the tribunal, I don't know, under like whether they have like friends of hers that are now running it or whatever. I had a story of a client of mine who called me and said, would you be willing to chat with my friend's parents, because they own they owned a home and they own the one right next door, and they had always planned that their elderly parents were going to move in and they were going to give it to their kids, right? Like they were going to live, and they would live next door. It was like multi-generational, like I can't remember what nationality they were, but this was kind of always their plan. And they went to the tenants and said, listen, we'll give you whatever you need, but we need the house back. And that, by the way, one of the only ways you can take a property back is to say that yourself or your immediate family is going to live in it and needs to live in it. They said, no, we're not leaving. Nope, we don't believe you, and we're not leaving. So you have no right to kick us out. So they took them to the tribunal. They hired a paralegal and lost, went back on appeal and lost, and they were told, you haven't given us sufficient evidence to show that that you need it for your kids, so no, they can stay. So what people have to realize is that if she's instilling this as well, it hurts the renters also, because then there's less rental opportunity for people to come in. And what did she do instead? She created a rental fund. And I think that, I don't remember how she put it. I was so horrified by the video or commercial or whatever it was. It was like, are you a little short this month? You overspent? She also said you lost your job or whatever, you know what I mean? You can apply to pay your rent. The city of Toronto will pay your rent out of this rental fund. And I'm like,
well, the funny thing about that is
people lose their jobs. And I don't want to sound heartless, but what did people do before when they lost their jobs? They figured out they go get another job.
But I think you have to go back to the very beginning of why rent is so high. And under her watch, property taxes have gone up 25%. And a lot of people on the left, Progress Toronto included, will say she is the voice of the renter and she's right there for them. But who do landlords pass that increase down to?
But they can't because of the Ontario increase. So if so she's to the renters who live in the old buildings.
Yeah, but I'm talking new buildings. When you talk about going downtown, and all of those condo buildings, they are the ones who are absorbing the increase in property tax. That is, that's what's happening down there, certainly in those newer buildings. And so if people are having problems, paying their rent, like you kind of have to go back to the source of that, which is an enormous property tax increase that gets downloaded to them. And so, I think that there is a lot at the city that needs to change. And she is just not going to be the right person to be mayor to make the changes that we need. She hasn't made them in the past 3 years. I mean, she came into office after the by-election saying she was going to tackle all of these problems. These are still problems, and we haven't really seen any, I would say, like, robust policy to help improve safety, to make life more affordable here, to make sure that like you can get places safely on the TTC, or that you're not sitting in traffic for God knows how many hours a day trying to get from one end of the city to the other.
Yep. No, it's all very, very true. And what's scary is, all the money now that she's spending to, empty the coffers before the election to impress everybody and to say, oh, no, like, look at all the police on the street. Or there was something that she announced about that 911 calls were down, and that people felt safer. She made this correlation, and I was like, no one's calling 911.
Yeah, people aren't calling. Yeah.
Well, no one's answering. You put on hold.
And this is something that we often hear from, the left-wing folks who follow us, that crime is down. Well, unreported crime, because people don't trust that the system is going to work in their favor, is happening. And just because it's not reported, like, it's happening. You cannot deny that. The number of people who I speak to who are like, well, I just didn't bother because...
Or it's down because people have to pay for their own private security.
Exactly.
If you look in the neighborhoods that were getting broken into, mostly the ones that did have the high car theft, they all have security guys sitting in their cars outside their house 24 hours a day. So yeah, crime's down, because now, again, those people would say, well, they can afford it and blah, 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 and whatever.
Yeah, but those people pay property taxes, which is supposed to get you those services. That's how it used to be. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, did anybody have private security? I don't think so. Not at the same rate that we do now.
I think that, and I think that we will see this in New York, because we were talking a little bit about this and what we just saw in the elections in for Congress in New York State, which is, in my personal belief, horrifying. Is that, and I don't think that these people care necessarily, but if it's like the bees, when you take the bees out of the ecosystem, it's not just the bees, it's everything else. And so what is going to happen is that if you do not have a safe place for people to raise their family, if you do not have a place for people to be able to build a business, to afford to live, they're going to go elsewhere. And they're going to leave Toronto. They're going to leave Canada, whatever it is. And so all those services, like those rental break slush funds and whatever you want to call them, that are going to help the voice of the renter, is not going to be there, because the people who are paying the taxes and property taxes and all of that stuff are going to be gone.
Yeah. And, I know of a couple of people who have already packed up and they've moved down to Florida. And these are great people who have contributed. There's so many, and these are amazing people who have contributed to the fabric of Toronto, have built businesses here, have built not-for-profit organizations, and we are losing out on this talent. When we talk about being pro-economic development, that means that we can't have a brain drain of people leaving because the city has become inhospitable in any number of ways. We want to keep our talent here. And quite frankly, we also want to attract businesses here. And in order to do that, you have to have really talented human capital. And so losing out on that, I mean, it's just a losing game to be in that situation where some of your, your best and your brightest are just up and leaving. We have to turn that around and make this city, as I've said, as great as we know it can be.
And it's such a great city. It really is. I was raised here. There's so much going for it, and it really is a shame to see it disintegrate. It really is on so many levels.
Yeah, I love Toronto. I When we first moved here, I lived in Thornhill, but as soon as I came back from grad school, I wanted to live in the city. My very first apartment was at Yonge and St. Clair, and then saved up so I could buy a place actually like down at Jarvis and Church, which, was really just like great neighborhood, and then lived in the St. Lawrence neighborhood for a long time. Like, it was amazing. You roll out of bed, like go to the market, get breakfast, go get your produce, do all of those things. It
So
was
great.
wonderful. And now, my husband and I, we bought our place in East York. And it's just, this is like a lovely neighborhood to raise
is.
my daughter. And we just, we want to see the city live up to its potential. And it's just not doing that under Mayor Chow and, these Progress Toronto backed councillors who basically think decline is okay.
Yeah, I really am looking forward to the October election, and I hope that anyone who's listening today who feels like they want change, that the city is not going in the direction, listen, read up on the counselors, know what you're voting for. Don't just take the headlines from any of them. And I think who's in your ward is also really, really key.
Very important.
Really, really key because, yeah, I think that, new leadership at City Hall will change things. But if you still have someone in your ward that is, not pushing for change and thinks that what's going on, I think, not to get into it again, but like Gord Perks stepped down. I have a very dear friend that lives in the ward. She, God bless her, would email him. He's the reason you can't drive into High Park anymore, And now she almost wept when she saw he was stepping down. She was so happy. And then lo and behold, who, I don't even know what her name is. The woman
Diana Chan McNally, who is arguably worse than Gordon.
Yeah, that's what I said to her. I go, be careful what you wish for, because the devil that you know may be better than the devil you don't. And she now wants to increase the number of tents and encampments. She doesn't believe that police have it's literally horrifying. And so not only is it so important for you to be choosing the mayor that aligns with what you want Toronto to look like, but also get out there and know who is in your ward, because
I would say to your friend, go check out Nadia Guerrera, who is running in that ward. Nadia is smart, middle of the road, very centrist, and I think she's going to run a really competitive campaign. But like I said at the outset, is going to need help to go knock on doors, to drop literature, to do phone banking. And if folks are wanting to know, in their ward who they can sort of go to, they can certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to point folks in a direction. But if folks are just looking to sort of dip their toes and get involved, the other organization to look at who organizes, lots of sort of days of action is CJ PAC. They have one coming up on July 5th. You can sign up at their website, and they will connect people with with different campaigns across the city. And so I do, as sort of my final closing message, because I think we're coming to the end here, will reiterate what I said at the top, which is elections are won at the door. So if you have a couple of hours every weekend or even on a weeknight to help a candidate canvass, do it. It's, you'll get your steps in, which is great, but you'll really get a sense of what's happening across the city. And better yet, if you do it in a neighborhood that isn't the one that you live in, because then, you might fall in love with a new neighborhood in Toronto, and that would be a wonderful byproduct of that.
You could have a new friend by the end of it. You never know. Like I think it's a great message, and I really appreciate you being on today, Kelly. It was great. Thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to just making and wanting to see the city be a better place. Regardless of who is running it, we need it to be better, and that person needs to be involved in making it better. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.